Welcome, sleepy one. I'll be your storyteller tonight. Before we begin, please like and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And now, close your eyes. Let's begin. They say your first big move in your 20s shapes who you become. I never really believed that, until the spring of 2018. I can still see the gate in Seattle, the smell of burnt coffee and rain-soaked asphalt drifting through the terminal. Rachel was dragging her rolling suitcase behind her, the little wheels squeaking over the tile, while Ethan paced beside her, jaw tight, trying and failing to look calm. I watched them from a few seats away, pretending to scroll my phone, pretending I wasn't watching something quietly fracture. When she hugged him, it wasn't the kind of casual airport hug you give before a weekend trip. It was the kind that pressed two hearts together until you could feel the pulse of the other person in your own chest. That small, heavy silence in the air when you know someone you love is about to leave, and maybe part of them won't come back. Rachel had always been ambitious. The promotion in Portland was exactly the kind of break she'd worked for. Creative freedom, leadership, a chance to finally prove herself. I understood it. I even cheered her on, though it meant our friendship and her relationship would have to stretch in uncomfortable ways. Ethan and Rachel had been together 2 years. Everyone thought they were inseparable. They're the forever couple, people said, with that smug certainty that makes you want to roll your eyes. But back then it actually felt true. At the gate, Ethan's voice trembled as he said, "We'll make this work. I promise." Every weekend, every call. Nothing changes. He tried to smile, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. Rachel nodded, eyes glassy, brushing a loose strand of hair off her cheek. They laughed, soft, nervous laughter, about how he'd better not burn down his kitchen in Portland or humiliate himself with his karaoke obsession. It was endearing, that mix of love and fear hanging between them. The fear of distance, of change. For the first few months, they did everything right. Nightly video calls, morning texts, selfies with sleepy smiles. Ethan drove down every other weekend, always showing up with flowers or some trinket he thought she'd like, or a handwritten note tucked into her bag. To anyone looking from the outside, they were solid. But love, like anything stretched too thin, begins to fray quietly. By summer, small shifts crept in. Missed calls, late-night texts saying, "Sorry, too tired," excuses about work dinners or deadlines. Ethan didn't see danger in any of it. He told himself she was just busy. He trusted her. He wanted to. The friction, he said, was just part of the distance. But some pains aren't about growth, they're about decay. By July, even Ethan couldn't ignore the pattern. The canceled weekends, the shorter calls that turned into brief, distracted audio chats. Whenever he tried to talk about future plans, visits, trips, even a simple weekend, Rachel would change the subject with careful skill. One Friday evening, Ethan's best friend Mark handed him a beer and said, "Man, she's slipping away. You feel it too, don't you?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Hope has a way of sticking to your ribs even when it's rotting. Love makes you defend illusions long after they've started bleeding out. That night, something in him cracked. Rachel had canceled another visit. Urgent project, can't get away. He couldn't take the distance anymore. Without a word, he grabbed his keys and drove the 3 hours south to Portland, his mind rehearsing the reunion he hoped for. Maybe she'd laugh, throw her arms around him, tease him for being paranoid. Maybe it would fix everything. By the time he reached her apartment, it was close to 10 p.m. The streets were quiet, slick from an earlier rain. He parked a few blocks away, his pulse drumming in his throat. As he passed a small cafe near her building, something caught his eye. Through the wide glass window, Rachel sat at a corner table with a man he didn't recognize. Her hand rested lightly in his. She was laughing, the kind of laugh Ethan hadn't heard in months, not with him anyway. The world seemed to slow around him, sound draining out until all he could hear was his own breathing. His fists clenched, his chest tightened. For a long, unbearable moment, Ethan just stood there in the amber light bleeding from the cafe window, watching the life he thought he had slipped quietly out of reach. For months, Ethan had forgiven the missed visits, the late-night work emergencies, the pauses on the phone that lasted too long. He told himself she was tired, just adjusting to the pressure of a new city. He trusted her because that's what love was supposed to mean. But standing in that small Portland cafe, Watching her fingers tangled with another man's, reality hit like a freight train. Rachel had moved on. When she looked up and saw him through the window, her face drained of color. For a split second, her eyes widened. Shock, guilt, fear, all fighting for space on her face. She leaned across the table, whispering something to the man beside her. He turned toward Ethan, studied him for half a heartbeat, and then shrugged, indifferent, like none of it mattered. Rachel came outside, her steps hesitant. The air smelled like espresso and rain-soaked pavement. I didn't think you'd actually come," she said, voice trembling. Her eyes glistened under the streetlight, guilt swimming behind them. Ethan swallowed hard, the taste of metal thick in his throat. "How long?" he asked. The words barely made it past his lips. She hesitated, then whispered, "Since June." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how to end it with you. I didn't want to hurt you, but..." She stopped herself, looking down. Ethan's jaw tightened. His body moved before his thoughts caught up. He turned, walked past her, past the glowing cafe window, past the laughter spilling from inside. No yelling, no scene, just silence. He drove the 3 hours back to Seattle with the hum of the highway filling the emptiness. Each mile replayed a lie. The canceled plans, the rushed calls, the excuses he'd believed because he wanted to. In the weeks after, he tried to find some version of peace. He stopped checking his phone every few minutes, deleted her from social media, buried their old texts in the digital graveyard of his inbox. Friends took him out for beers, tried to joke him back to life, but every laugh felt borrowed. Because ghosts don't die when people leave. They linger in the spaces you built for them. Every time Ethan drove through Portland for work, he felt that same cold pit open in his stomach as he passed the cafe. He could still see her hand resting in someone else's. Could still feel the moment his heart cracked cleanly in two. The betrayal wasn't just that she had fallen for another man. It was that she had let him keep believing, tethered him to a love that was already dead. Looking back, all her excuses sounded absurd. Too tired, too busy, too many deadlines. She hadn't been too busy. She'd been too afraid to be honest. Convenience over courage, fear over truth. His nights turned restless. Sleep came in fragments, broken by half-dreams where her voice apologized over and over, or laughed from behind the glass he could never reach through. Anger flickered sometimes, but beneath it was a deeper sadness, a hollow acceptance that love doesn't always die cleanly. Sometimes it rots in silence, leaving you to watch it decay through a cafe window. Months slipped by. He dated again, cautiously, always comparing, always wary of warmth that felt too practiced. Every new smile had to pass through the filter of old pain. Trust came slowly, if at all. He started journaling late at night, writing everything he couldn't say out loud. Not to blame her, but to understand. To trace the pattern of how people build illusions and call them love. Somewhere between the pages, a truth crystallized. Everyone carries two lives, the one they show you and the one they protect. Rachel had perfected that balance. Ethan learned that heartbreak isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, polite, and cold. It doesn't shatter you. It erodes you grain by grain until one day you realize you're lighter, emptier, and strangely free. Years later, he still passes that cafe sometimes. The city's changed, but the memory hasn't. He doesn't feel anger anymore. Not even despair. Just clarity. The calm ache of someone who loved a person who had already let go. The truth he carries now is simple. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes with a gentle smile and a hand held in someone else's. He's moved on, carefully, learned to value honesty over comfort, transparency over charm. He no longer waits by windows, no longer feeds the fragile hope that someone will come back once they've already chosen another world. Love, he's learned, is precious, but trust is everything. And once broken, it rarely heals the same way. He guards his heart now, not out of fear but out of respect for its weight. Because love can be messy, unpredictable, and flawed, but deception, no matter how soft it sounds, is never love. Trust must be earned. Patience should never mean being strung along. And when someone shows you they've already let go, believe them. Walk away before you become another ghost lingering outside a cafe window. True love tells the truth. Everything else is just a lesson disguised as forever. I met Liam during my sophomore year at Boston University. In a sociology class neither of us particularly cared for. I remember that day as if it's burned into the back of my eyelids. One of those humiliating moments that somehow turns into the beginning of everything. My laptop had crashed just hours before my paper was due, and I sat in the library on the edge of a meltdown, surrounded by crumpled notes and half-empty coffee cups. My hands trembled as I tried to salvage what I could when a voice broke through the noise. "You look like you could use a hand," Liam said, leaning against the table, a backpack slung over one shoulder. His tone was calm, too calm, and it had this strange gravity that made you believe things would somehow turn out fine. He didn't just help. He stayed for hours, typing beside me, walking me through concepts I'd half slept through in class, even lending me his laptop when mine refused to turn back on. He didn't roll his eyes when I fumbled through his explanations. Instead, he cracked jokes, dry, clever ones that slipped out between lines of sociology jargon, and somehow I found myself laughing through my stress, heart pounding from something other than panic. From that day on, Liam became a fixture in my life. He remembered my coffee order, medium roast, 1 cream, 2 sugars, without asking. He'd wait outside class with an extra cup on cold mornings. He stayed up late when I couldn't sleep, answering texts that started with "You up?" and ended in half-coherent confessions about life. Once, when I forgot my jacket on a windy October afternoon, he wordlessly took his off and draped it over my shoulders. Everyone noticed, of course. "He's obviously in love with you," my friends would whisper, smirking whenever he walked by. I'd roll my eyes and shrug. "He's just being nice," I'd say, though part of me knew they weren't wrong. But Liam was safe, dependable, steady in a way I didn't yet appreciate, and I was 20, impulsive, drawn to noise and chaos and men who made me feel alive in the worst ways. I flirted, chased excitement, let myself get caught up in fleeting romances that burned bright and fast. When Liam's voice softened with hints he couldn't quite say aloud, I smiled it away. "You're the sweetest, Liam," I'd tell him, brushing it off like it meant nothing. I never saw the quiet storm brewing behind his calm eyes, never noticed the way his gaze lingered when he thought I wasn't looking, the sigh he tried to swallow when I mentioned someone new, the flicker of pain when I disappeared into someone else's arms. Liam loved me silently, completely, and I mistook it for friendship. His love didn't demand, it waited, patient, invisible. I didn't understand how deeply that kind of love could wound the person carrying it until much, much later. Through the years, he became my safety net. When boyfriends cheated or ghosted or shattered me, Liam was the one who showed up. When I needed a ride home at midnight, he was already in the car, headlights cutting through the dark. When I couldn't afford groceries one semester, I'd come back to find my fridge stocked. No note, no questions. His kindness was a hum beneath the noise of my messy life, a soft constant I came to depend on without realizing it. I remember one night in junior year, sitting on the floor of my dorm room, surrounded by notes from a failed exam. My chest hurt from crying, the kind of crying that makes your throat ache. Liam appeared quietly, setting a steaming cup of hot chocolate beside me. "Hey," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You're stronger than you think, and you don't have to face this alone." I smiled through the blur of tears, leaning into him just a little. The warmth of his hand lingered in my hair, his heartbeat steady beside me. I never stopped to wonder what it cost him to always be the one who stayed. Looking back, I can see it now, the quiet sacrifices, the years of unspoken longing, the devotion I absorbed like sunlight without ever offering warmth in return. Liam's love was a contract I never meant to sign, but I lived inside its terms all the same. I loved him, yes, but not in the way he needed, not in the way he deserved. My love was dependence. His was devotion. Then Derek came along. He was everything I thought I wanted, charming, reckless, magnetic in the way that made my pulse jump. He swept me off my feet with big gestures and sweet words, the kind of attention that felt like oxygen after years of steady, quiet care. Liam noticed immediately. Of course he did. He always knew. When I told him about Derek, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "If he makes you happy," he said softly, "then that's all that matters." I didn't understand then what that silence meant, the ache buried beneath his calm. The final crack in something that had held for too long. I only understood it later when I told him I was engaged, and his voice for the first time had nothing left to offer. The wedding day felt like a dream I was only half awake for. The chapel smelled faintly of lilies and candle wax, soft music weaving through the hum of whispered anticipation. As I walked down the aisle, Derek's face glowed with joy, eyes bright and sure, but my gaze betrayed me. It drifted past him, toward the back row. Liam stood there, almost hidden in the crowd. His posture was impeccable, shoulders square, expression calm. But his eyes, they were heavy, full of years I had lived through without truly seeing him. When our eyes met, the world fell silent for a heartbeat. I saw everything in that look. Devotion unreturned, love exhausted by waiting, and the quiet resignation of a man finally letting go. It was like facing a mirror that reflected not my beauty but my neglect. At the reception, Liam was flawless. He smiled for the photographs, laughed at the right moments, even raised his glass when Derek clinked his against his own. "To Hannah," he said evenly, voice steady enough to fool everyone, "who deserves all the happiness in the world." The room erupted in cheers, and I smiled too, pretending the world hadn't just tilted beneath me. My bridesmaids leaned in with dreamy sighs. "He's such a good friend," one whispered, and I nodded, though the words felt hollow. I had seen the quiet tragedy behind his practiced smile. The surrender, the way a heart dies without ever making a sound. Later, when the music slowed and laughter began to fade, I caught sight of Liam near the exit. He didn't make a scene or say goodbye. He just slipped out quietly, his absence folding into the night like a sigh. Still, I felt him everywhere, the echo of every kindness I had accepted without acknowledgement. Near the door, I noticed something lying on the floor. A tie, the one I'd given him for his birthday, a simple navy silk with faint silver stitching. I lifted it, thumb brushing over the fabric. Had he dropped it in haste or left it behind intentionally? Either way, I understood. It wasn't a loss of fabric, but of meaning. He had given everything and walked away with nothing but his silence. Years passed. Every so often, my phone would buzz with a message from Liam. Always brief, always polite. "Happy birthday, Hannah. Hope you're well." Or "Merry Christmas. Wishing you peace this year." There was never bitterness in his words, just a quiet weight, a trace of something unspoken. I'd smile, type a quick thank you, then sit there staring at the screen, feeling a strange ache where guilt and nostalgia lived side by side. It took me years to name what I felt. The horror wasn't betrayal or loss, it was recognition. The slow, unbearable realization that someone had loved me fully, selflessly, and I had consumed that love without return, that I had mistaken consistency for comfort and patience for permanence. In my chase for passion, for the rush and thrill of love that burned bright, I'd overlooked the rarest kind, the one that endures quietly. Liam had been the steady heartbeat beneath the noise of my youth, and I had treated it as background music. As I grew older, I began to understand. Kindness, patience, devotion, these are not small gestures. They are choices, deliberate and weighty, and to receive them without care is its own kind of cruelty. Every text, every late-night rescue, every silent sacrifice had been a language I refused to learn until it was too late. Now, when I think of Liam, it's with a mix of admiration and regret. He became, without meaning to, a compass, a measure of what love can look like when stripped of performance. He never yelled, never demanded, never tried to own me. He simply loved, and that simplicity was what made it extraordinary. I built a life with Derek. We've had adventures, laughter, and our share of storms. But through it all, I carry Liam's lesson with me. Love isn't just fireworks. It's the quiet presence that steadies you when the lights go out. It's showing up over and over without being asked. Whenever I see acts of kindness now, a hand offered without condition, a word spoken softly instead of loudly, I think of him. Of how devotion once ignored becomes a haunting. Not a ghost in the traditional sense, but a memory that breathes behind every moment of tenderness, reminding me to notice before it's gone. Because love, real love, isn't loud. It's patient, humble, enduring. And if you're not careful, you'll miss it completely. Until you're left staring at a forgotten tie by the door, realizing too late that the truest thing in your life was the one that asked for nothing in return. They say you never really know someone until you've seen them at their worst. I used to think that was just one of those Hallmark-sounding quotes people tossed around after a breakup to make themselves feel wise. Back then, I thought I knew Emily completely. 6 years together had to mean something solid, right? We had a rhythm, one that time builds slowly and quietly. Saturday morning coffee runs, the way she'd sing off-key in the shower and laugh when I covered my ears. Those long drives through the back roads of Austin where we'd talk about nothing and everything. Watching the sun bleed orange over the hills. She was my anchor when work stalled. My partner in crime when the bills piled up. The person I pictured kneeling in front of someday, ring in hand. But anchors don't just hold you steady. They can drag you straight down too. It was November 2021, one of those crisp Austin nights when the air had just enough bite to remind you summer was gone. I was helping Emily's younger brother Jason fix his iPad, his homework lifeline, he called it. The kid was sprawled across our couch, eyes glued to the basketball game flickering on the TV, barely pretending to care whether I fixed it. When I finally handed it back, he didn't even look up. "Can you make it work like new?" he said, as if I were some kind of tech support. I laughed under my breath and told him I'd try. That's when I saw her name, Emily's, pop up in the Messages app. Her account had synced through the family cloud. At first, I didn't think anything of it. We trusted each other. At least I thought we did. I scrolled absent-mindedly. Old group texts, memes, her friends gossiping about shows. Then a name stopped me cold. Just 3 letters. JBC. The tone of the messages hit me before the words did. Playful, intimate, sharp in a way that cut deeper the longer I read. She was joking about me, my snoring, how I always lost my keys. Even the way I worded texts. It felt like someone had cracked open our private life and turned it into a punchline. Then came the words that broke me. I miss you. I love you. The same words she'd whispered to me that morning over burnt toast and coffee. My chest went hollow. Jason was still yelling at the TV, completely unaware that my world had just splintered in half. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. It felt like I'd swallowed a mouthful of ice water that wouldn't melt, that just spread through every vein. 6 years together, and suddenly it all looked like a mirage. Every memory replayed itself with new cracks running through it. I didn't say a word that night. I closed the app, handed Jason the iPad, and forced a smile. Later, when Emily came home, her cheeks pink from the cold, arms full of takeout Thai, she kissed me on the cheek and asked how my night was. I told her fine. My voice didn't even shake. She smiled, completely at ease, while I sat there dying behind my own eyes. After that night, something in me fractured. I became an actor in my own life, performing the role of a boyfriend who didn't know, laughing at her jokes, pouring whiskey into my coffee just to get through mornings, telling coworkers I was tired when the truth was I hadn't slept in days. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was slow, constant, like a low-grade fever I couldn't sweat out. I needed proof. A plan. So every night while she showered or scrolled through Instagram, I printed copies of those messages, each page a fresh stab to the gut. I hid them in a folder in my closet. By the end, I had 75 pages. Her lies, neat and inked. My heartbreak alphabetized. Then came the lawyer. I told him we weren't married but shared a lease, a bank account, a dog. He was all business, explaining what was mine, what wasn't, what I'd need to separate cleanly. His voice was cold, clinical. I nodded like we were negotiating a contract, not dismantling my life. The hardest part wasn't collecting evidence or planning the exit. It was lying beside her afterward, feeling her reach for my hand in the dark, hearing her whisper, "I love you, Michael," knowing she was typing the same thing to someone else. Betrayal doesn't scream. It sits beside you quietly. It eats dinner with you. It laughs at your jokes, and you let it because facing the truth would mean tearing your world apart. So I waited. I watched her carefully, her tone, her routines, the little inconsistencies in her stories. I memorized her lies. I told myself I'd know the right moment to confront her, that I'd keep control when I did. It felt like living in a war zone without weapons, just instinct and restraint. She still didn't know I knew, and I planned to keep it that way. Then one Friday night she mentioned a spa weekend with her friends. Just a couple of girls unwinding, she said, brushing my shoulder as she passed. I nodded, smiled like a fool, and asked her if she'd packed her robe. My voice didn't crack, but inside something finally did. I knew JBC was flying in because I had quietly checked Emily's credit card activity. An invasion of privacy I justified as survival, not spite. My chest tightened the entire drive as I followed her car from a distance, headlights off, keeping at least 2 turns between us. She never noticed. Not even when I parked half a block down from the hotel on South Congress and watched her step out, brushing snowflakes from her coat. My stomach twisted when I saw her hand slip easily into his like it belonged there. I walked toward them slowly, the folder in my hand feeling heavier than paper, more like a grenade with the pin half pulled. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my voice came out steady. "Emily." She spun around. The color drained from her face. "You can either walk out of this hotel and move your things out of my apartment tonight," I said, lifting the folder just enough for her to see it. "Or I show these messages to your parents, your coworkers, and every friend who thinks you're loyal." She froze. Tears pooled instantly in her eyes as her bottom lip trembled. JBC stepped forward, trying to puff up and insert himself, but I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes locked on hers. "Michael, please," she whispered, breath shaky. "I didn't mean any of it. Please don't do this." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask her why, but I didn't. I wasn't there to understand or fix us. I was there to protect what was left of me. Walking away after loving someone that long doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like surgery without anesthesia, necessary but agonizing. That night I returned home with trembling hands and a heart that wouldn't slow down. I placed the folder on the dining table where she'd find it if she came back, a silent indictment. No public chaos, no spectacle, just consequences. Sleep didn't come. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every meal we'd shared, every stupid inside joke. Every night I fell asleep thinking I was safe. Betrayal is a ghost. It lingers in the walls, sits on the sofa, follows you from room to room. You feel it even when you're alone. The weeks that followed blurred together in a mess of phone calls, paperwork, and disorienting silence. Emily kept trying to reach me, first with sorrow, then anger, then desperation. I stopped answering. I blocked her everywhere. Still, she found ways in. New numbers, fake emails disguised as work notices. Each buzz of my phone set my nerves on edge. I started checking the locks twice, then 3 times. I watched the cameras I installed like a man waiting for an intruder who already lived in his head. Rusty, our dog, became my grounding force. He'd curl beside me, pressing his warm body against my ribs while I reread those printed messages, reminding myself why I couldn't cave. His quiet loyalty was the only steady thing in my life. Then one evening, a sharp knock rattled my apartment door. My heart lurched. I looked through the peephole. Emily. I forced my breath to steady before opening the door just a fraction. "Emily," I said flatly. "We're done, leave." She tried to smile, her old trick, eyes soft, voice syrupy, like she could charm her way back into my life. But whatever spell she once had was gone. I repeated myself firmer. When she refused to leave the hallway, I called the police. Only then did she finally go, glaring through tears. When the elevator doors closed on her, I leaned against my wall and felt, for the first time in months, the smallest inhale of freedom. The months after were slow but healing. I changed the locks, adjusted routines, filled the apartment with my choices instead of ours. Therapy helped me untangle the knots she left behind. Emily never disappeared completely. Her family called, mutual friends sent just checking on you texts, and every now and then a message from her number would pop up. Polite at first, then unhinged. I never replied. The hardest part wasn't proving her lies or cutting her off. It was facing the question that gnawed at me. How could someone I loved so deeply laugh at my vulnerability and walk away without flinching? Eventually, I stopped needing the answer. By the 1-year mark, I was steady again. I had Rusty, my work, my friends, and a sense of self she hadn't managed to destroy. I focused on people who respected me, on building boundaries instead of excuses. Emily's ghost still knocked sometimes, but it no longer had a key. Love without honesty isn't love. It's a liability. Trust is fragile. Instincts matter. And boundaries, real boundaries, aren't cold or cruel. They're armor, the kind that keeps your heart from bleeding out in someone else's hands. I've always believed in second chances, though my record would call me a fool for it. My 20s were a blur. Cheap airports, late rent checks, freelance gigs that barely covered gas. Every relationship I touched ended in betrayal. Rebecca, my ex, had been the worst of them all. She siphoned money from my photography fund to feed a gambling habit I didn't even know existed until the collection calls came. After that, I promised myself I'd never hand anyone that kind of trust again. Then I met Clara. Clara was different. Calm, creative, grounding in a way that made the air feel less heavy. She designed graphics for small businesses and lived in a rustic cabin she'd inherited on Maple Lake Road in Vermont. When she invited me to stay, it sounded like something out of a winter magazine spread. Snow falling outside wide windows, warm bread in the oven, a life built on quiet and light. The first few weeks were a dream. We'd cook soup together, laughing when one of us dropped a spoon into the pot or skate clumsily on the frozen lake while she steadied me by the hands. At night, we'd sit by the fire, editing photos or sketching redesigns for the cabin. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd come home. But home has a way of showing its cracks. It began with late-night phone calls Clara swore were client meetings. I could never make out the other voice, and when I walked past the loft, the sound would cut off instantly. She guarded her laptop like a vault, snapping once when I moved it off the couch so I could sit down. The little things, the kisses, the jokes began to fade. The first warning came quietly, like frost spreading across glass. One March evening, I came home early from a shoot, expecting the soft quiet of the cabin. On the porch sat a sleek black leather jacket I didn't recognize. Inside, 2 wine glasses waited on the table, one still half full. "Was that your cousin?" I asked, trying to sound light. She let out a breezy laugh. "Yeah, my cousin dropped by." But Clara had told me more than once she had no cousins nearby. I smiled anyway, pretending to believe her, telling myself my paranoia was just old scar tissue. Still, something in me wouldn't unclench. Some nights she'd step outside for fresh air, and in the morning I'd find new tire tracks in the snow. The warmth of the cabin began to feel staged, like a set built for someone else's comfort. By April, the snow melted into thin rivers along Maple Lake Road. I convinced myself her quirks were harmless, that it was my anxiety twisting reality. That illusion shattered one night when truth finally slipped through. I was editing photos in the living room, coffee steaming beside me, when I noticed Clara's phone glowing on the table. A message preview blinked. "He's asleep, come now." My stomach turned. Then came laughter from upstairs, soft, careless, not hers alone. I moved toward the bedroom, pulse hammering. Through the half-open door, I saw Clara lying in bed with Ethan Blake, the local contractor who did odd jobs around the cabin. They didn't startle. When she noticed me, her expression wasn't guilt. It was amusement, like I'd interrupted some private joke. Ethan chuckled under his breath. Clara's eyes met mine, calm and cruel. Every shared moment, the soup, the lake, the warmth, collapsed into a lie. I didn't scream or demand answers. I just stood there until my body gave up and I retreated to the couch, shaking. The next weeks crawled. Snow blocked the back road, trapping me in that place. Clara didn't even bother hiding anymore. Ethan's truck showed up every other night, and I learned to tune out their voices through the walls. The cabin creaked differently now, alive with tension. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps when I knew no one was there or find objects slightly moved. Sleep came shallow, and every reflection in the window seemed to watch me back. Even the lake, once a calm blue mirror, felt like it was mocking me. Living with betrayal isn't about explosions. It's the quiet erosion of who you thought you were. I had dreamed of proposing there, of building a life in that cabin. Now I was counting days until the roads cleared. By mid-April, I built routines to survive. I logged when Clara left, when Ethan arrived, when they stayed too long. Every movement, every meal became deliberate. I ate cold soup to avoid noise, slept in layered clothes in case I had to leave fast. One night, I decided to stop pretending. I wasn't ready to confront her directly, but I could start making her feel seen. "Clara," I said, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, my hands clenched around a cold mug that hadn't been touched in hours. "I can see Ethan's truck in the driveway more than you see me. What exactly is going on here?" She tilted her head, that practiced little laugh slipping out like it was rehearsed. "I don't know what you mean. Are you jealous, Daniel?" "Jealous?" The word came out sharp, bitter. My chest tightened, heat flooding my throat. Jealous doesn't even cover it. This is our home. I thought it was safe. I thought we were building something together. For a flicker of a second, her face softened as if she almost felt it too. Then the mask slid back on. Safe, she echoed, smirking faintly. Darling, life isn't that neat. That night, I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling while their muffled laughter bled through the walls. Every sound, the low murmur of their voices, the rhythmic creak of the bed pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't move. It was then I understood. Love wasn't just capable of healing, it could also wound deliberately. Clara had crafted a life that looked peaceful on the outside, a sanctuary meant to lure me in, only to strip me bare once I was trapped inside it. Every smile, every touch had been part of her design. The snow began to melt, slow and steady, loosening the world's hold on me. I started to plan my exit in silence. Each morning, I'd pack something small. A charger, a camera lens, a pair of socks, and tuck it away in the trunk of my car beneath a blanket. I memorized the road conditions, the slush, the thawing ice. I knew leaving too soon might spark a confrontation I wasn't ready to face. On the last weekend of April, I stood by the lake, watching sunlight ripple across its surface. The reflection of the cabin shimmered back at me, hollow and strange. The same place that once felt alive now felt like an echo. I didn't hate Clara, not yet. What I feared most was what I'd become under her roof, small, careful, uncertain. My sense of safety, of home, had been dismantled piece by piece. When May came, I executed my escape. I waited until Clara left for town, then packed what little remained of my life into the car. Ethan's truck was gone too. I didn't leave a note or a word. I just drove down Maple Lake Road with the windows open, letting the sharp spring air slice through the car. It smelled of thawing soil and pine, freedom almost. Relief and grief tangled together in my chest. The days that followed blurred. I found a short-term rental in town. Plain walls, quiet neighbors, and buried myself in work. Photography became my therapy. Late nights editing photos of deserted streets, forests heavy with morning light, empty benches under gray skies. Each image was proof that beauty still existed beyond deceit. Sometimes, though, the dreams came back. The cabin, the sound of their laughter, the hollow feeling of being invisible in my own life. And when I woke, it wasn't anger I felt. It was disbelief at how normal it had all seemed until it broke. That illusion of normalcy made the betrayal sharper, like a knife hidden under silk. Friends asked why I hadn't confronted Clara. I never had a good answer. Rage and fear aren't always loud. They can sit quietly, coiled behind your ribs, waiting for the right moment to turn into motion. Leaving wasn't cowardice. It was reclamation. Weeks became months. I rebuilt slowly, cautiously. I reconnected with old friends, with family. I began taking photos of dawn again, new light breaking over landscapes that didn't hold her ghost. Eventually, I even started dating, though carefully, aware now of how easily warmth could disguise rot. I never went back to Maple Lake Road. I imagine the cabin still stands, snow melting, returning, melting again, a hollow shell that once looked perfect. Clara's betrayal left its mark, but it also taught me something essential. Trust is fragile. Love is not safety, and comfort can be the quietest disguise of danger. Now, when I enter a room, I notice everything. The way shadows bend on the floor, the creak of wood, the silences that hang too long. It's not paranoia. It's vigilance carved out of experience. I know now that darkness can live behind warmth, that some people build beauty just to bury decay beneath it. But I also know I survived it. I moved on. Maple Lake became a chapter, not the story. Love without honesty is just performance, and trust once broken is never the same again. Still, the heart, battered, bruised, cautious, keeps beating. And with every photograph, every sunrise, I remind myself, resilience is the only kind of love that never lies. I never thought I'd return to online dating after years of failed relationships and slow, humiliating heartbreaks. I'd sworn it off completely, but in March 2022, loneliness has a way of whispering louder than reason. I downloaded Match.com one last time, telling myself this was it. No games, no flings, just honesty. Maybe if I was lucky, something real. I built my profile carefully, choosing photos that felt natural. Me at my desk, coffee in hand, My golden retriever sprawled across the couch, a blurry shot from a hiking trail outside San Diego. The bio took forever to write. Coffee addict, dog lover, occasional hiker, graphic designer looking for someone who respects boundaries and laughs easily. It sounded honest enough. Then came Nathan. His profile overflowed with sunny hiking trails, dogs with bandanas, and captions that made me laugh out loud. Professional overthinker who packs too many snacks, one said. We started messaging casually. Favorite movies, worst jobs, what we'd do if we won the lottery. He was funny in a dry, careful way. Patient, kind. He never pushed. And slowly I let my guard down. After a few weeks, he suggested we meet. I chose a crowded pub near the Gaslamp Quarter, a place alive with noise and light where safety didn't feel like a privilege. When he walked in, my stomach dropped. He looked nothing like his pictures, older, heavier, eyes sharp and watchful. I almost left, but a voice in my head scolded, "Don't be shallow. You can sit through one drink. Hey, Claire?" he asked, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, Nathan?" I said, forcing one back. The first few minutes were tolerable. We traded small talk about work, San Diego traffic, and overpriced coffee. But as the night dragged on, something shifted. He leaned in too close, his tone growing invasive. "So what went wrong in your last relationship?" I froze. "That's kind of personal for a first date." He chuckled, low and humorless. "Come on, I'm just trying to know you." When I declined another drink, he insisted on walking me to my car. The night air felt heavier outside. "It's fine, really," I said, gripping my keys. But he kept following. At my car, he tried to kiss me. "Stop," I said sharply, pushing him away. I said no. He blinked, offended, like I'd broken some unspoken rule. I got in, slammed the lock, and sped off, hands shaking, pulse hammering. I told myself it was over. Just a bad date, a story to laugh about someday. But 3 days later, a bouquet appeared at my door. No, just flowers. Then chocolates. Then a letter. "You don't have to be scared. We're perfect together. You'll see." My breath caught. I had never given him my address. The gifts kept coming. Stuffed animals, a silver bracelet, a framed photo of a sunset with "For Us" scrawled on the back. Each one made my stomach twist tighter. At night, I began hearing things. Slow footsteps outside my window, the faint click of gravel shifting under weight. I'd yank the curtains aside and see nothing. Then one morning, I found a single rose taped to my car door. That broke something in me. I called my brother Evan. "Don't hang up," I said, voice cracking. "I think he's here." He was at my apartment within hours. "Jesus, Claire," he muttered, inspecting the door. "You should have told me sooner." He installed new locks, set up cameras, stayed on my couch for a week. When we finally checked the footage, we saw him, or something like him. A shadow near the door at 2 a.m., tall, still, deliberate. He didn't try to break in. He just stood there for nearly 10 minutes, then disappeared. The image was too grainy to identify, but it was enough. Someone was watching. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, a neighbor, a delivery mix-up, but deep down I knew. Nathan had crossed some invisible line, and I had no idea how to pull it back. Friends urged me to call the police, but without proof, all I got was a sympathetic shrug. "We can't act on hunches, ma'am." So I lived in constant vigilance, checking locks twice, keeping the lights on, sleeping with my phone clutched in hand. Then another package arrived. A necklace this time engraved with "Forever Mine." Something in me snapped. I refused to live like prey. I set up my kitchen table, placed my brother's handgun on the counter, and photographed it. Clean, centered, unmistakable. Then I printed the photo, sealed it with a note. "Try me again, and this is what you'll find waiting." I mailed it to the P.O. box Nathan had used. That was the last I ever heard from him. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was something denser, heavier. Relief laced with the weight of knowing how close I'd come to being another story that didn't end this way. Months passed, and I began to reclaim fragments of safety piece by fragile piece. The fear never truly left, it just quieted like a hum beneath everything I did. Even after the immediate threat was gone, the echo of it lingered in my mind. Every vibration from an unknown number made my heart skip. I double-checked every lock, sometimes 3 times before bed. I learned to walk with my keys threaded between my fingers, scanning reflections in windows, shadows under cars. I deleted every dating app for good. The idea of strangers behind curated smiles felt poisonous now. Danger wearing the mask of charm and shared interests. The whole experience had rewired how I saw people. Nathan's persistence had once felt flattering, even tender. Now I recognized it for what it was, a pattern. A slow tightening of control disguised as care. Late at night, I'd lie awake replaying every step of it. The flirty jokes, the little compliments, the way he'd asked about my day like it mattered. That's how it always starts, with kindness that isn't really kind. I realized too late that the danger had never arrived suddenly. It had walked in wearing familiarity. Sophie, my roommate back then, used to say, "People like him don't change, Claire. They escalate." I remember her voice clearly, steady, protective. "You did the right thing," she'd remind me whenever I doubted myself. Her words became a mantra. I had stood up for myself. I had drawn a line and enforced it. That mattered. Months blurred into a year and life began resembling something like normal. I went back to work, smiled at colleagues again, started seeing friends, always cautious but not caged. I rebuilt my sense of safety brick by brick, creating boundaries so solid that no charm or persistence could slip through the cracks. Every new connection was filtered through hard-earned experience but not fear. I refused to let terror define me. I learned how to protect both the body and the mind. Security cameras, reinforced locks, location sharing with family. But I also built emotional armor, acknowledging fear without surrendering to it. Survival, I learned, isn't just staying alive. It's choosing not to let the memory of threat consume the present. Years later, I married Darren, a gentle, grounded man who never made me question safety. Life felt peaceful, predictable, almost soft again. Until one evening, stepping into a restaurant for a dinner party, I froze mid-step. At a table near the corner sat Nathan, older, broader, laughing, the same loud, confident laugh I'd once mistaken for warmth. Sitting across from him was a woman who could have been me years ago, nervous smile, leaning in, trying to impress him. My blood ran cold. He didn't see me. I stood there, motionless, before muttering to Darren, "I'll be right back." In the restroom mirror, my reflection stared back, older, stronger, trembling only slightly. "He's not my problem anymore," I whispered, though my voice faltered on the last word. Still, the image of that woman wouldn't leave me. The way she laughed at something he said, oblivious to the danger sitting across from her. I felt a cold shiver of guilt and helplessness. Evil doesn't disappear. It migrates. It finds new hosts, new prey. Even now, I carry those lessons like instinct. Vigilance, courage, boundaries. They're not paranoia. They're survival. I've learned to trust instinct over politeness, to act fast when something feels wrong. Never give out your address. Never ignore the quiet alarm that rises in your chest. Boundaries aren't walls, they're proof that your life is worth protecting. Safety isn't just physical. It's psychological, a daily act of self-respect. And trust. Trust must be earned, not assumed. Because danger doesn't always come crashing through the door. Sometimes it smiles first. I was 24 when my life started to feel like it belonged to someone else. My father had died suddenly the year before, an aneurysm, the kind that doesn't give you time to say goodbye. Grief had hollowed me out in ways I didn't have words for. The only thing that kept me steady was routine. Every morning I took the same route to the cafe on 3rd Avenue, the one with the chipped teal awning and the smell of roasted beans that clung to your clothes. I'd worked there 3 years, long enough to know every regular's order before they opened their mouth. The college girl with the messy bun wanted 3 shots in her latte. The guy from the law office needed oat milk with cinnamon dusted on top. The older woman in the wool coat ordered a cappuccino extra dry and always left exact change. The rhythm of it all was comforting, familiar. It made the grief manageable. My guilty escape outside of work was TikTok. At first it was harmless. Videos of latte art shaped like hearts, short clips of the espresso machine steaming milk, rainy Seattle streets filmed through fogged glass. My account was small, anonymous. My videos got maybe a dozen views, a few likes from strangers who'd never meet me. Then one Friday, a customer came in and said with a grin, "Make me the strangest drink you can think of." I laughed. filmed the process on a whim, the chaotic swirl of syrups, the exaggerated presentation, and posted it that night. By morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Thousands of notifications, views, comments, shares. Overnight, my quiet, predictable life had been cracked open. "Hey, you're the coffee girl from TikTok, right?" a guy said the next day while I wiped down the counter. He smiled like he knew me, and just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. People wanted more. They asked for tutorials, behind-the-scenes glimpses, funny customer moments. I started posting daily. Each notification felt like oxygen. Each new follower filled the space my father's absence had left behind. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. Seen, wanted. But then the shadows appeared. At first, the comments were harmless. "Wish you worked at my coffee shop. You make my mornings brighter." Flirty, a little invasive, but fine. Then one username started showing up again and again. "A Carla True. You're prettier without makeup. Don't wear the black apron tomorrow." "Wear green," I laughed it off at first. Creepy, but probably a coincidence, I told Marcus, my coworker, as we refilled the pastry case. "People can see what I wear in my videos." He shrugged. "Yeah, still weird though. Maybe block them." I didn't, I should have. A few nights later, a new comment appeared during my live stream. "Careful walking home alone after your shift." My heart lurched. My shifts ended at 10. No one online should have known that. "Marcus," I whispered as we closed up that night, "can you check outside?" He walked to the window, wiping condensation from the glass. "There's some guy leaning against the lamppost," he said. The laugh that came out of me didn't sound like me. It was thin, strained. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, even in my tiny apartment, the fear followed me. Every creak in the walls made me flinch. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia. During another live stream, I forced a smile, reading comments out loud, pretending everything was fine. Then one message appeared on the screen, glowing white against the darkness of my room. "Your bedroom light flickers too much. Change the bulb." I froze. The lamp beside my bed had been flickering all evening. He'd seen it. My throat closed. The camera's tiny green light glared back at me like an eye. I slammed my laptop shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. Marcus called later. "It's probably just some troll," he said, voice gentle. "No," I whispered, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles ached. "This isn't just online. He's here." It escalated after that. Twice I found my car window shattered after work. Nothing stolen, just broken glass glinting under the streetlight. The second time, there was a note tucked beneath the wiper. "I like the red scarf. Wear it again." I stood there in the cold parking lot, the sound of the city distant and hollow, realizing that the internet hadn't just found me, it had followed me home. I hadn't posted that scarf online. I hadn't even mentioned it to anyone. That was the moment it hit me. He wasn't just watching through a screen. He was following me. I went to the police the next morning, clutching the crumpled note like proof of my own sanity. "Someone is stalking me," I said, my voice thinner than I expected. I showed them the messages, the photos, the videos. The officer behind the desk flipped through them, nodding slowly. "We'll file a report," he said, his tone practiced, detached. "But unless he directly threatens you, there's little we can do." I stared at him, waiting for something, reassurance, urgency, anything. But all I got was a polite smile and the hollow sound of his pen scratching across paper. That calm indifference made the fear worse. I walked out feeling invisible, my pulse hammering against my throat. That night I bought a cheap security camera from a late-night electronics store. The box promised peace of mind, but I could feel my hands trembling as I installed it above my window. I left the app open on my phone, the grainy live feed showing my parked car beneath the streetlight. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Movement detected, my breath caught. I opened the app. The camera flickered, then stabilized, showing a crouched figure beside my car. Hood pulled low, shoulders hunched. He was scratching something into the paint. I froze, watching as he straightened slowly, turning toward the lens. Even through the pixelated feed, I could see him clearly. Gaunt face, pale skin, eyes wide and unblinking. Then he smirked, right into the camera. I screamed before I realized it, fumbling for my phone, calling 911. When the police arrived the next morning, I showed them the footage. Their tone changed instantly. No more polite detachment. Within days, they had a name. Jonas Reed, 32, unemployed, living out of his car. arrested for stalking, trespassing, and vandalism. They found things in his vehicle that made my stomach twist. A stack of printed screenshots from my TikToks, pages of notes on my schedule, my favorite drinks, even a hand-drawn map of my route home. He'd been planning every step. After they took him away, I thought I'd feel relief. But the terror didn't fade. It just changed shape. At night, I'd wake to the faintest sound, a creak, a soft tap, and my heart would launch into a sprint. I'd sit up, holding my breath, convinced someone was in the apartment. Shadows stretched longer than they should. Footsteps from the hall above made me flinch. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. The cafe no longer felt safe either. The warmth that once anchored me now felt like a trap. Every face at the counter seemed suspicious. Every stranger could be another Jonas, watching, memorizing. Even my phone, once a source of validation, felt dangerous. I stopped posting. Then I stopped checking comments. Then, eventually, I deleted the app entirely. My digital world, once vibrant and full of connection, shrank until it barely existed. I locked everything down. Double-checked doors. Reinforced the windows. Installed motion sensors in the hallway. Each small precaution made me feel both safer and more caged. Sleep came in fragments, light and restless. My mornings became slow rituals of scanning the street before stepping outside, rehearsing escape routes in my head. Therapy helped. My therapist's office smelled faintly of eucalyptus, and her voice had that calm steadiness I'd been missing for months. She made me name my fear, describe it, shrink it until I could hold it again. Slowly, I began to breathe differently. But the truth remained. Digital exposure had turned into a physical threat. Jonas hadn't needed to touch me to ruin my sense of safety. His intrusion, mental, emotional, invisible, had left scars deeper than any bruise. It took months before I started to feel normal again. I moved to a new apartment, different neighborhood, different commute. I changed my routines, rebuilt from scratch. Eventually, I tiptoed back online, cautiously. I posted about coffee again, but never the cafe's name. Never the view from my window. Never anything personal. Every post became a calculation. Every caption a decision about what pieces of myself were safe to share. Bit by bit, I reclaimed pieces of my old life. Walks by the waterfront. Coffee with friends. Evenings spent reading instead of watching the door. But I never forgot. Visibility is seductive. It feels like connection. But it also invites those who believe your life belongs to them. Fame, even the smallest kind, taught me a brutal truth. Not everyone respects boundaries. Some people will follow you out of curiosity, others out of obsession, and some, like Jonas, will follow you until they find your door. Protect your space, your silence, your anonymity, because the scariest part of being seen is realizing who's watching back. I'd never been a fan of online dating. Growing up in Brighton, my parents' divorce had carved deep cracks into my idea of trust, especially digital trust. My father's affair had been uncovered through a string of secret messages, a digital trail that tore our family apart. I swore I'd never let technology betray me the way it had betrayed my mother. For years, I avoided swiping, profiles, all of it. Yet at 26, I found myself on my small couch in my flat on Marine Parade, scrolling through an app called True Match. My roommate, Maya, had worn me down with her relentless optimism. "You'll meet someone decent, Soph. Just give it a try." I wasn't convinced. I made my profile cautious to the point of paranoia. No last name, no workplace, no location tags. My bio was minimal. Teacher, coffee addict, loves old bookstores. I told myself that was safe enough. I wasn't going to be another person fooled by a smiling profile picture and easy charm. Then I matched with Adrian Walsh. He was different. No cheesy pickup lines, no emojis stacked like confetti. He asked about my favorite author, about childhood summers by the sea, about what I missed most when it rained. His questions were careful, disarming. I remember feeling something rare, relief. Someone was actually listening. Soon we traded voice notes. His tone was calm, steady, threaded with warmth. The kind of voice that made you unclench without realizing it. After a week of cautious back and forth, he asked for my number. My heart fluttered and tightened at once. But his patience had earned a sliver of trust, so I gave it. Texting outside the app felt strangely intimate, like stepping into a quieter room. Our conversations had rhythm, small jokes, stories from my classroom, complaints about cold mornings. For the first time in years, I felt light, almost normal. It all shifted the night he asked for my Instagram. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the keyboard. My account was private, family, close friends, no one else. "I'm not comfortable with that yet," I typed, careful not to sound harsh. The reply came instantly. "Oh, don't worry. I've already found you." My stomach clenched. I stared at the message, reading it again and again. What did that mean? Soon, his text began referencing things he shouldn't know. A photo of me at Brighton Pier. A shot with blurred student art behind me. The cafe where Maya and I grabbed coffee every Friday. I hadn't told him about any of it. My skin went cold. He had traced my life through digital breadcrumbs. Reverse image searches, tags, maybe even location data. Every boundary I thought I'd set had been an illusion. Then came the messages that made me stop breathing. "I saw you ordering your usual cappuccino. Didn't realize you'd be here today." At first, I clung to rationality. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he lived nearby. But that comfort died with the next message. "You should really draw your curtains, Sophie. Anyone could be watching." Fear settled in like damp air that wouldn't lift. I told Maya everything one night over tea, my voice shaking. "I think he's watching me." Her face drained of color. "You need to go to the police now, save everything, screenshots, times, dates." But what crime could I report? He hadn't touched me. He had only invaded inch by inch until even my silence felt unsafe. Then my phone rang at work. It was the principal. His voice was uneasy. "Sophie, someone emailed the school pretending to be you. They asked for student photographs for a class project. We didn't send anything, but I thought you should know." I felt the world tilt. Adrian had crossed the invisible line, from digital obsession into my real life. My breath caught as the realization hit. He wasn't just watching me anymore. He was inside my world. The paranoia I'd tried so hard to keep at bay became impossible to ignore. Every narrow lane in Brighton looked menacing. Every car that slowed near me after dark felt like a threat waiting to unfold. I changed my routines, left home at odd hours, stopped going to the Friday coffee shop, checked locks and windows until my knuckles ached. I deleted my dating profile, blocked his number, even bought a new phone, but nothing erased the feeling that he was always one step ahead. His presence was invisible yet everywhere, like static you couldn't switch off. Sleep became a stranger. I'd jolt awake at 3 a.m., certain I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom. The smallest sound, a creak in the floor, a car engine idling down the street, sent adrenaline surging through my chest. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being irrational, but then my mind would replay the thought of Adrian watching, quietly, from somewhere I couldn't see. Teaching became my only refuge. In front of my students, I could pretend I was fine. But even at school, the illusion cracked. I started noticing unfamiliar faces loitering near the gates, people who seemed to glance toward my classroom windows a little too long. Every new message notification made my stomach twist, my hand hovering before daring to open it. Maya begged me to go to the police. "You have to, Sophie. You can't live like this." But each time I tried, the same helpless frustration took over. Without a clear threat, without something physical, the officers could only shrug sympathetically. No fingerprints, no trespassing, no crime, just me, unraveling under something they couldn't see. One evening still plays in my head. I'd stayed late grading papers and was walking home through the narrow lane behind my favorite bookstore. My hood was pulled low against the cold. The sound of my own footsteps echoed back too loudly. A black car slowed beside me, idling. My heart stuttered. The driver's window rolled down. For a second, I braced myself to see his face, but the seat was empty. Just shadows, I told myself. Just shadows. By the time I reached my flat, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. It hit me then. Adrian didn't need to be near me to own my fear. His obsession had seeped into every corner of my life. Every online trace I'd left, photos, posts, places, had become a roadmap for him. I no longer trusted technology, or worse, my own judgment, so I erased myself. Deleted every social account, deactivated my email, changed numbers again. I even moved just a few blocks away, but it felt monumental, a desperate attempt to outrun a ghost made of data. I installed motion sensors, replaced the locks, and stopped going out alone after dark. Even grocery runs felt like tactical operations. Maya tried to keep me grounded. "You can't let him win," she'd say softly, touching my arm. "You're stronger than this." I wanted to believe her. But strength doesn't cancel fear. It doesn't erase the knowledge that someone has seen you, studied you without ever laying a hand on you. Adrian's invisible presence had rewritten my reality. I began to understand that safety wasn't about deadbolts or police reports, it was about control. About reclaiming what parts of myself I allowed into the world. Each precaution I took wasn't just protection from him. It was a boundary between me and the fragile illusion of normalcy I'd lost. Months passed. Slowly, the panic dulled. I could breathe again, though the air never felt as clean. I eased back into teaching, cautious but present. I visited the bookstore again, taking new routes each time. I let a few colleagues into my trust. When I finally began dating again, I did so with care, never online, never blindly. The hardest truth to accept was that the danger had never arrived with a bang. It had crept in, disguised as kindness, wrapped in patience and attention. He hadn't shattered my world overnight. He'd eroded it one detail at a time. I had let him in through the smallest door, one harmless message, and it had cost me the quiet peace of simply existing. Now I live carefully. I trust cautiously. I still love the small things, books, coffee, the sea, but I guard them differently. The internet, once a window to connection, is now a glass I approach with deliberate steps. I survived the invisible invasion, but it changed me. I learned that the most dangerous monsters don't need to break in. They just need you to let them follow. In a world where technology remembers everything, vigilance isn't paranoia, it's self-respect. I never thought Charleston could feel this lonely. After the divorce, I was sure a new city would fix everything. A clean slate at 38, far from the small town where every street corner reminded me of her. The townhouse I'd rented near the historic district was supposed to feel like freedom. Instead, it felt hollow. Boxes stacked in the garage, blank white walls, my mother's antique furniture still wrapped in old blankets. I told myself I wanted simplicity, but I hadn't realized how silence could amplify your own thoughts until the house started echoing with mine. I worked remotely in finance, steady, predictable, safe. The kind of work that keeps the lights on but drains the color out of your days. Mornings bled into evenings and weekdays melted into one another. Weekends were the worst. That was when I caught myself scrolling through contacts, hovering over names I'd already lost. So I started looking for something real again. Something that didn't live behind a screen or inside a spreadsheet. The local library's book club seemed harmless enough. A dozen people, mostly kind, chatty, a little eccentric. We talked about poetry and novels like people trying to sound thoughtful. That's where I met Sophie Turner. She was 27, 10 years younger, but carried herself like someone twice that. Quiet, deliberate, the kind of person who listened before deciding if she wanted to exist in the room. Her soft brown eyes lingered on the pages she read, tracing words like they might bruise if she turned them too fast. When she smiled, it came with hesitation, as if she needed permission. At first, it was just small talk. What did you think of the ending? Have you read the sequel? Polite exchanges that slowly stretched into longer conversations. She laughed easily, but never too loud. Asked questions that made me think instead of filling silence. When I finally asked if she wanted to have dinner sometime, she said yes without hesitation. Too casually, maybe. I told myself it was normal. Just two people who liked books sharing a quiet meal. I spent the whole day preparing. Roast chicken with lemon and rosemary, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots, my grandmother's old recipe. I even polished the silverware I hadn't touched since the divorce and opened a bottle of Chardonnay I'd been saving for a someday that never came. Fresh tulips sat in my mother's antique glass vase on the dining table. The house smelled like home, or at least the version I kept chasing. Sophie arrived at 7:30 sharp, a small notebook tucked under her arm, her cream sweater soft enough to match the way she spoke. "Your house smells wonderful," she said, smiling faintly at the tulips. But when dinner began, she barely touched the food. "Not a fan of roast chicken?" I joked, trying to ease the stiffness between us. "Oh, it looks amazing," she said, eyes darting from the table to the walls. "I just wasn't very hungry tonight." I poured her a glass of wine anyway. She accepted it with both hands, polite, careful, but didn't drink. The conversation drifted from books to art to the city. I was grateful for the rhythm until it changed. "So do you live here alone?" she asked suddenly. I hesitated. "Yeah, for now." "Do people visit often?" I laughed, but it came out awkward. "Not really. Work keeps me busy." She nodded slowly. "And your neighbors, do they check in on you much?" There was something strange about how she asked. Not curious, clinical. My stomach tightened, but I smiled through it, trying to convince both of us it was normal small talk. By dessert, my hands were slick with sweat. She excused herself to the bathroom, saying she needed to check her notes. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to tidy up, listening for the sound of running water. It never came. 10 minutes, 15. My pulse thudded in my throat. I imagined her rifling through drawers or standing silently just beyond the doorway listening. When she finally came back, she looked composed. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "My sister's unwell. I should probably go." Her voice was calm, too calm. She thanked me for dinner, smiled politely, and walked out. The front door clicked shut like a period at the end of something I didn't understand. That night I lay awake replaying every detail. The untouched food, the strange questions, the silence. Around midnight, glass shattered in the kitchen. I jolted upright, heart pounding. For a second I told myself it was the wind. Maybe the tulips had fallen. I padded down the hall barefoot, every step sounding too loud in the dark. The vase lay on the floor, water spreading across the tile like a dark mirror. And she was there. Sophie stood near the counter, her pale fingers hovering above the knife block. Her expression was unreadable, the calmness of someone perfectly sure of themselves. "Sophie?" My voice cracked. She glanced up at me, not startled. Not guilty, just there. Her hand wrapped around one of the knives, sliding it halfway out. Then she stopped. Slowly she pushed it back in. No anger, no smile. Just a whisper so soft I barely heard it. "Your house feels too quiet." Then she slipped out through the back door, swallowed by the darkness. I stood frozen for a moment, unable to move or breathe. When my body finally caught up with my mind, I called the police. They arrived within 15 minutes, 3 officers, calm and professional. The house filled with the sound of radios crackling and boots on hardwood. One took fingerprints from the knife handle and the untouched wine glass, while another photographed the broken vase and scattered tulips. "Do you want to press charges?" one of them asked gently. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "I just want her gone." The officer studied me for a second, then nodded. "If she comes back, call us immediately." After they left, the silence returned, heavy and unnatural. I changed the locks the next morning, ordered security cameras online. I skipped the next few book club meetings, then the next several after that. The days blurred into each other, a fog of paranoia and sleeplessness. Every sound made me jolt. The creak of floorboards, the wind nudging the shutters, the hum of the refrigerator. Even my reflection in the mirror startled me sometimes. I couldn't stop replaying her voice. "Your house feels too quiet." They weren't just words. They were an assessment, a warning, maybe even a claim. My home, the one thing I'd built from the ruins of my old life, felt invaded, tainted, like I no longer lived there alone. I started locking the doors automatically, even in daylight. I canceled plans, ignored texts, screened calls. Any visitor who came by, I checked against the book club roster just to be sure. Charleston, once the place that had promised me peace, began to feel like a beautifully painted cage. Friends tried to help. "You're safe now," they said. "She's gone." "I know," I'd answer. But I didn't, not really. Fear doesn't take hints. It lingers, coiled somewhere behind your ribs. I stopped cooking the meals that used to comfort me. The smell of rosemary and lemon made my stomach turn. I stopped buying flowers. The house became sterile, stripped of color, exactly as Sophie had implied it should be. Quiet, controlled. At night, I made rounds like a security guard. Checked every window latch, even in the guest room I never used. I slept with my phone in my hand, flashlight app open just in case. Every flicker of shadow carried a story. One where she came back. One where I didn't wake up in time. Weeks turned to months. I finally began therapy. For the first time, I spoke the details aloud. Her tone, her eyes, the deliberate calm she carried like armor. My therapist said loneliness had made me porous, open to people who looked harmless because I wanted to believe they were. That vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a door. Sophie had just walked through it. Over time, I tried to reclaim my life in small ways. I went back to the book club, carefully watching everyone more closely. I learned to read people differently. The pauses between words, the restless glances, the tone hidden beneath politeness. Online, I deleted every personal detail that might give anyone a map of my routines. My world shrank to what I could manage, what felt safe. Still, the house carried her shadow. Every creak in the floorboards, every hum of silence became a living reminder that trust once broken leaves stains you can't wash out. Eventually, I redecorated. Bought new furniture, fresh tulips, this time yellow instead of red. I invited friends over again, carefully with laughter that didn't quite reach full volume. I tried to believe the house could belong to me again. I learned that boundaries aren't just locks and alarm systems. They're emotional, social, psychological. Sophie had taught me that danger doesn't always announce itself. It can enter quietly, smile softly, and leave you doubting your own instincts. In the end, what terrified me most wasn't the knife or the broken glass. It was how easily someone could step into your world, rearrange your sense of safety, and vanish, leaving you questioning every sound, every silence, every decision you thought was harmless. Loneliness makes us open the wrong doors. But vigilance, I've learned, isn't paranoia, it's protection. Trust is something you build slowly like a wall, and silence. Silence can be peaceful, or it can be a warning whispering to you in the dark to guard what's yours before someone else decides to. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who could watch love slip away, slowly, quietly, like sand through my fingers. At 29, I believed I had everything with Hannah Clark. We'd been together since high school, 10 years of shared secrets, late-night drives, and inside jokes that belonged to no one but us. People used to smile when they saw us together, nodding knowingly as we held hands in the hallways or lingered under the gym bleachers after football games. That easy affection followed us into college, into our first jobs, and eventually into the tiny apartment with the squeaky floorboards where we thought we'd build a life. Hannah was unlike anyone I'd ever known. Bright, creative, stubborn in all the ways that made her feel alive. She worked at the community theater, writing scripts, directing plays, chasing her dreams with a relentless fire that made me proud. I worked at a marketing agency, trading my evenings for promotions and client dinners, believing that stability was how you protected love. For a while it worked. We found balance. We'd cook dinner together, take late walks through the city streets, and lie awake planning names for the children we swore we'd have someday. But life has a way of shifting beneath your feet without asking permission. Slowly, cracks began to show. It started with small things. Missed dinners, unanswered texts, the slow erosion of laughter. I'd come home tired and hungry, hoping to find her waiting for me, only to see her curled under the dim lamp. Sketchbook open, pencil scratching across paper.
"Hey, how was rehearsal?"
I'd ask, hanging up my jacket. "Fine," she'd murmur, not looking up. The clipped tone shouldn't have stung as much as it did, but it did. I'd sit nearby pretending to watch TV, pretending her silence didn't feel like rejection. That night I lay awake listening to her breathing from across the bed, the rhythmic rise and fall that used to comfort me. Now it only reminded me how far she felt. The faint scratch of her pencil against paper carried through the dark, and I realized I didn't really know her anymore. We were two people living parallel lives, overlapping only through habit and memory. My heart ached, but I told myself it was a phase. Love, I thought, could survive distance. It had to. Days turned into weeks, and the silence deepened. Her phone began to live face down on the kitchen counter. She smiled at texts but rarely explained them. When I reached for her hand, sometimes she hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. The laughter that once filled our apartment was gone, replaced by careful words and empty spaces. One evening, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I sat beside her on the couch, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. "Hannah," I began, my voice shaking despite how long I'd rehearsed the question. "Are we okay?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the cushion, tracing small circles with her fingertip. The air between us felt heavy, almost sacred, as if it knew what was coming before I did. Finally, she whispered, "I don't feel the same anymore." For a moment, the words didn't make sense. What? I said, blinking. What do you mean? She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes weren't angry. They were soft, resigned. I love you, she said quietly, but it's different now. It's not the way it used to be. I've changed. You've changed. Somewhere along the way, it just faded. I wanted to argue, to pull her into my arms and make her remember the promises we'd made, the nights we'd spent laughing until sunrise, the way we used to whisper, I love you, like it was sacred. But she didn't flinch, didn't cry. She was calm. There was no villain in this story. No betrayal, no affair, no cruel twist. Just two people who had loved each other once and were slowly realizing that sometimes love isn't enough to keep you together. Just the quiet erosion of something I thought would never break. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours, the mountains outside glowing pink and orange in the fading sunset. The air between us was still, brittle like a thread stretched too tight. I took a sip of wine, but it tasted sour, metallic. Hannah traced the rim of her glass slowly, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. I wanted to tell you sooner, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I just didn't know how. I nodded. My throat felt dry. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound small beside the enormity of what we were losing. No shouting, no accusations, just the unbearable quiet of something ending. The next morning, her toothbrush was gone. The closet hung half empty, the scent of her shampoo fading from the air. On the table lay a single note in her careful handwriting. Thank you for everything. Please don't hate me. I didn't hate her. I couldn't. What I felt wasn't rage. It was a hollow ache, like the echo of a sound long faded. I wandered through the apartment, touching the objects she had once touched. The mug with a chip on the rim, her favorite blanket draped over the couch, the faint trace of her perfume lingering near the kitchen counter. The rooms felt alive with her absence. For weeks I moved through my days in a haze. I'd hear phantom sounds, the jingle of her keys in the lock, her laugh spilling from the balcony, her footsteps padding toward the bedroom. But when I turned, there was nothing. The silence mocked me. I tried to drown it with work, with gym sessions, with laughter that felt forced. Friends offered comfort in well-meaning cliches. Time heals everything, they said. You'll find someone else. But they were wrong. You don't replace 10 years of shared life with a stranger's smile. You just learn to carry the emptiness differently. I couldn't even call it betrayal. There was none. No lies, no deceit. The horror was in the absence of a culprit. No one to blame. Just the slow, natural death of something once sacred. At night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, the same view of the mountains stretching before me. I'd trace the edges of memories like scars, our first kiss behind the bleachers, long drives with no destination, the laughter that used to fill this tiny apartment. I realized then that love isn't sturdy. It's delicate, more fragile than we ever want to believe. It doesn't always end in flames. Sometimes it just fades quietly, respectfully. Months passed. The apartment slowly shed her ghost. I painted the walls a new color, rearranged the furniture, tried to build a life that didn't orbit her absence. I started going on dates, awkward at first, each one feeling like a betrayal of the past, but eventually it got easier. Still, there were moments I'd catch myself glancing at the empty chair across the table, expecting her to fill it with her laughter, her voice. Every photo, every old note tucked in a drawer, reminded me that the person I loved most hadn't abandoned me. She had simply become someone else. I learned to forgive, not her. There was nothing to forgive but myself. I hadn't failed. Love isn't something you lose through neglect or incompetence. It isn't a possession. It's a living thing, and sometimes, despite your best efforts, it just stops breathing. By the time I turned 30, I understood something I wish I'd known sooner. Attachment isn't permanence. Losing someone doesn't always come from betrayal or anger. Sometimes it's just the quiet, invisible drift of two lives growing in opposite directions. Hannah left me with no villain to curse, but she left me with something else, a lesson I still carry. To cherish love while it exists. To speak before silence hardens. To see the signs before they turn into distance. I learned that not every ending is dramatic. Some end gently, almost politely, yet they wound just as deeply. Love isn't guaranteed. It needs presence, awareness, tending. And when it fades, there's no one to blame. Only the understanding that grief can exist even without wrongdoing. In that absence of blame, I found something close to peace and the fragile truth of the human heart. I never imagined my life could feel so fragile. At 34, I was running a small graphic design studio in downtown Portland, Maine, living with my wife Clara and our 10-year-old daughter Emily. From the outside, we looked like a normal family. Dinners around the table, school drop-offs, and a dog that barked at every delivery truck. But underneath, our home had been quietly fracturing. You could feel it in the air each evening when I walked through the door, thick, oppressive, like humidity before a storm. Clara had changed. She worked late, vanishing into the night with vague excuses about parent-teacher meetings or lesson plans. Her laughter, once spontaneous and bright, had dulled into something distant. Whenever I entered a room, it was as if the air left her lungs. Her phone was always in her hand, her thumb moving in anxious little bursts, her eyes darting toward messages she never shared. I tried to convince myself it was stress, that she was overwhelmed, that I was imagining the distance. But the silence between us at night became unbearable. She would lie on her side, back turned, breathing steady and cold, and I would stare at the ceiling, wondering if she was thinking of someone else. Even Emily seemed to shrink into herself. My bright, fearless little girl, who used to pirouette barefoot across the living room until the lamps rattled, now spent hours shut away in her room. Sometimes late at night I'd hear her muffled sobs. I'd knock softly. "Em, you okay?" Her voice would come back small, shaky. "I'm fine, Daddy, just tired." But I knew she wasn't. One night I tried to talk to Clara. "She's not okay," I said quietly as we cleared the dishes. "We need to talk to her, maybe get help." "She's just growing up," Clara cut in, voice calm but sharp. "Kids get moody. Don't make it a crisis." Her tone was final, flat, rehearsed, like a door quietly locking. After that, I started watching closer. Emily's glances lingered longer, her eyes flitting between Clara and me as though she were studying us, searching for some invisible pattern. She began leaving drawings around the house, small sketches of faceless people standing between two taller figures. Notes tucked into corners with strange little messages. "I'll fix it. Don't be scared." At first I dismissed them as imagination, a child's way of coping with tension she didn't understand. But the unease in my stomach wouldn't fade. It grew heavier day by day. The night everything fell apart began like any other. Rain drummed steadily against the windows as I came home late from the studio. I was exhausted, ready for the comfort of routine. But when I reached the porch, I stopped cold. Emily's pink ballet shoes were lying there, soaked through, the ribbons trailing in puddles. Inside, the house was too quiet. Her bedroom looked staged, bed neatly made, desk perfectly arranged, the air unnaturally still. On her pillow sat a folded note. My hands trembled as I opened it. In her small, careful handwriting it said, "Don't be scared. I'm trying to stop the bad things. I'll fix it." My heart plummeted. My little girl thought she could save us. She had gone out there alone into the rain, trying to repair something she didn't even understand. I found Clara in the living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Where's Emily?" I demanded. She didn't even look up. "She's being dramatic," she muttered. "You know how she gets." "Clara, she's gone." My voice broke. "Her shoes are outside." "She left a note." Her expression barely shifted. "She'll come back. She always does." Something inside me cracked. "What's wrong with you?" I whispered. But she just turned away, thumb still moving over the phone screen. I called the police. Within an hour, officers arrived, their radios crackling through the thick quiet. By midnight, they had traced Emily through nearby surveillance footage. Tiny, grainy images of her walking alone through slick streets, clutching her sketchbook against her chest, her hood pulled up against the rain. Determined, brave, terrified. We drove through the cold, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The harbor loomed ahead, an unfinished construction site of rusted beams and broken glass. Police flashlights swept through the fog, calling her name into the emptiness. Every passing minute hollowed me out. I kept imagining her small figure huddled somewhere in the dark, believing she could stop the bad things. My throat ached from calling her name. After 2 agonizing hours, one of the officers shouted. Beneath a collapsed scaffolding, they found her, pale, shivering, eyes open and unfocused, clutching her soaked sketchbook like a shield. I dropped to my knees beside her, my voice breaking as I whispered her name again and again. She whimpered softly. Alive. The sketchbook pages were torn and wet, but I could still see the drawings, dark shapes looming between a man and a woman. Our family, twisted into shadows. I held her against me, sobbing into her rain-soaked hair as the flashing red and blue lights painted the night in broken colors. Emily had stumbled upon Clara's affair with Rachel, the nanny we'd hired to help when work got overwhelming. While Clara's schedule grew heavier, Emily must have overheard whispered arguments, caught glimpses of things no child should ever have to process, and filtered them through her own fragile sense of right and wrong. In her mind, she wasn't a bystander. She was the one who had to fix it. Clara tried to hide everything. That night, she had been texting Rachel, covering her tracks, deleting messages, spinning half-truths even as the police searched for our daughter. When confronted, she didn't cry or shout. Her face was ghostly pale, her words measured, her tone eerily calm, like she'd rehearsed it all in advance. I remember looking at her and feeling something inside me collapse. I couldn't trust her again, not after Emily had nearly paid for the mess we created. The weeks that followed were suffocating. Clara was arrested and charged with obstruction, and Emily and I moved in with my sister. The house sat empty, a hollow monument to everything that had gone wrong. Every detail hurt. The damp ballet shoes still on the porch, the folded note on Emily's pillow, her soaked coat hanging by the door. My studio work fell apart. I'd stare at blank pages for hours, sketches dissolving into meaningless lines. Clients waited, emails went unanswered. My mind was stuck replaying the night she disappeared. Emily changed too. She withdrew further, her drawings darker, more deliberate. She filled page after page with shadows and faceless figures standing between two blurred shapes, a man and a woman. Even without words, I could see her understanding. She was drawing the distance between her mother and me, the invisible walls she felt pressing in. We talked often, quietly, about boundaries, about how adults sometimes make mistakes too big for children to repair. "You're not supposed to fix grown-up problems, sweetheart," I told her one night as we sat on my sister's porch. She nodded, eyes fixed on the stars. I thought, if I made it stop, you'd both be happy again. My chest tightened. "That was never your job, Emily. You just have to be a kid. I'll handle the rest." I took her hand and promised out loud that she would never have to carry that weight again. Life rebuilt itself in small fragments. Clara's presence faded into the background, her absence becoming a permanent part of the walls. I went back to the house eventually. It smelled of dust and rain, like something that had been waiting too long. I bought Emily new ballet shoes, clean, white, untarnished, and placed them neatly in her room. She smiled faintly when she saw them. We returned to routines, early breakfasts, quiet walks to school, simple dinners at the kitchen table. The police closed the investigation. Rachel was dismissed. The silence that once haunted the house began to feel peaceful again. Earned, not empty. Through therapy, we both started to heal. Emily's small, patient hands continued to draw, but her sketches changed. Lighter lines, open spaces, small suns peeking through the corners of her pages. "You don't have to draw the shadows anymore," I told her once. She shrugged, smiling. "Sometimes they make the light look brighter." I learned what real protection meant. It wasn't just locking doors or calling the police. It was making sure she never felt alone with her fears again. I learned the cost of secrets, the damage of silence, and how easily children try to mend the things adults break. Months passed. One evening, I watched Emily twirl again in the living room, her laughter soft but genuine. The lamps rattled just like before. I returned to work, slowly rediscovering focus, rediscovering something like peace. The note she'd left that night, "Don't be scared. I'll fix it," still sits folded in my desk drawer. Sometimes I take it out and read it, not as a reminder of what we lost, but of what we almost lost forever. I've learned that responsibility isn't just about ourselves. It extends to the fragile hearts watching us, learning from us, believing in us. Lies and neglect ripple outward. They shape the very way a child feels safe in the world. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's trust. And when that trust is broken, it leaves echoes that last a lifetime.